for one of the long-term things, I actually wrote this prompt from JJ where it's like, hey, go look at all my memories and all the things you think are ground truth and produce a document of all the things that you think are ground truth, and then compare that against only things that I have told you. And dude, 70% was like, they were like, oh,
Nonsense.
wow. Like I thought of this thing and then I referenced this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's why, and it was like,
Yeah.
just a ton of like, and I think hallucinated is the wrong word because it was synthetic thing where like it responded to something and then we talked for a while and in its thinking, it had recorded something as true that was only true to its own sort of like belief. Hey, welcome back to Founder Mode.
Yeah, we're here again, just you and me, Kev. I like it when we do these solo episodes.
I'm like, because I feel like it's the unscripted thing always throws off the like.
Well, you're a risk when you're unscripted.
Definitely,
But
I think
the
other. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's good. I think we talk enough outside of the podcast that we have these conversations like, oh man, we should talk about that on the podcast. That would be good. And then by the time the next one comes around, it's gone. Yeah,
ephemeral.
What's on your mind right now? What are you thinking about?
You know, it's interesting. I tried this new AI email thing, and it's got a very opinionated use case. And what they actually do is they take all the emails out of your inbox, and then they like send them later to you.
They change when they arrive, and so it's forcing you to prioritize who you respond to.
Yeah. So there's a company back in the day called SaneBox that it kind of turns your email into a whitelist, and they took all the emails out of your inbox. But now with AI, you can teach this thing. I'll just give them the prompt. It's like, the company's called I kind of like this company, like they're Every.2, if you've seen these guys.
Yeah. They have a bunch of little micro
apps. And so I've tried I turned on their Quora to a couple of my email accounts. So CORA. And so just to see, and like in one of my email accounts, I only get newsletters, and now I get no email because it takes all of them.
And then you just don't read them?
No, you get an email once or twice a day.
With the summary?
With a summary of what's in there, and then you have to click and go read it. Now, where it got caught, and then we actually had a guy that we're gonna have on the guest, my buddy Scott, like his newsletter was there, and I was like, oh, that's a good one. I forwarded it to you, and then you replied, let's have him on the pod. That got shipped into the like summary brief. So I was like, wait a minute, like that's weird.
Where did
Jason
that go?
always
Yeah, no,
responds
that's
to my
important.
email. Like, how could it be 2 days and like Jason hasn't responded? And I went back and it had said, oh, Jason from Winston Francois discusses this. So I was manually labeling that stuff and having admins check it. And that was my old model. And that works pretty well. It literally gives me things at the top that I can focus on. But I always had the rest of the stuff there where I could kind of browse through it at time. But this notion of like it going out of my inbox is a little bit opinionated right now. And so I'm going to see, like, again, I'm only trying to on 2 of my 6 emails, as you say, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I think the idea here, this is where AI is supposed to shine, right? The idea that you have, hundreds of emails you might get a day across 6 inboxes, and you probably don't need to look at most of them. And a summary is particularly useful. Like AI is very good at summarization. I think the thing that we were talking about before the show that I feel like this is a good segue from is kind of good AI. Like AI is good and helping us versus bad AI. And that newsletter you forwarded me kind of touches on this topic of like the Turing test and are we kind of getting sucked into the machine a little bit? I used the word sycophant when I was texting you the other day. You're like, I can't spell that word, so I don't use it. I wonder, like, how much are we trusting the machines, and are they helping us or are they hurting us sometimes?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, back to the email thing again, like the great examples, like, so I vibe coded a mobile app over the last 24 hours. So first time I built like an iOS, Android, web kind of, mobile app, and that thing generated, 100 plus commits and 30, 40 PRs. And all those emails went to my inbox, and that thing summarized it. And it had this really long summary of like these 15 topics. And I was like, what's this thing? And it was
Trying to make sense of it.
Trying to make sense of it, but also worse, it was reading all of the PR change request details and trying to like understand how we got there. And a lot of the stuff like I never saw because the vibe coding, I don't know how it made this mistake and added the testing and fixed it. And now you have another AI reading that and trying to educate me on what it learned. And I'm like pretty over the edge.
Yeah, not necessarily helpful. I said this recently that like I was starting to find ChatGPT had gotten really bad for me. like and less useful. And I read an article just in the last couple of days, and you probably already knew this, but I didn't realize that the way that the chat sessions work, each chat, it goes back and it stacks every single prompt. And so when you have sent one message, there's one message sent. And then when you send two, it's the first two. And then when you send three, it's all three, and so on and so forth. And so I was having these tabs, they were 800 megabyte of RAM on my Chrome tab because it had 100 back and forth messages between me and chat, and it became unusable.
Yeah. And what's interesting, this is funny. So this is like this whole notion of like, if you've played with these things, they do compaction and they try to summarize and how they manage memory. And my co-founder, JJ, he actually manages his memory directly. And so he doesn't allow, like a lot of these chat things, it's like, oh, it does the thing and then it summarizes it and creates like a kind of a semi-hidden memory or like sort of knowledge based.
He goes and touches the memory file.
He sets it up so you're like, it's only allowed to add things to memory that he approves. So he almost like change lists this thing. But what's interesting is that like the results that he gets over a long time are way more consistent. And so like I think there is this notion of like these LLMs sort of like thinking that they're smart, but a lot of times they're reading their own thoughts that were like suggestions. And so for one of the long-term things, I actually wrote this prompt from JJ where it's like, hey, go look at all my memories and all the things you think are ground truth and produce a document of all the things that you think are ground truth. And then compare that against only things that I have told you. And dude,
Yeah.
70% was like, they were like, oh,
Nonsense.
wow. Like I thought of this thing and then I referenced this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's why, and it was like,
Yeah.
just a ton of like, and I think hallucinated is the wrong word because
Yeah.
it was synthetic thing where like it responded to something and then we talked for a while and in its thinking, it had recorded something as true that was only true to its own sort of like belief. Where like, oh, chat's like, you have 5 locations. And it was like, oh no, we had talked about having one location, but we were thinking that there might be a time to open some more. And they said, what would be the number where we'd have to change the strategy? And it was like, oh, once you're at 5 locations, you have to change the strategy. But we never agreed that that was happening. But somehow in the chain, when I went back and said ground truth, it's like, oh, you have 1 location, but multiple times I reference you as having 5. And so they're like a bunch of chats after the fact have been referencing this kind of like implicitly wrong data. And so I think there is this, again, it's an interesting prompt. So say, go do all the things that you know about me, but then compare that against things that I've actually told you versus things that you think you know about me. And it was like surprisingly wrong.
Yeah. So I think we should try to break down the frameworks that we both use. So like just starting with the AI piece, like good AI versus bad AI, right? Like good use cases and good and right model, purpose built for right thing that you're trying to do, right? You have a pretty smart framework for how you do some of this agentic stuff where you think about how you interact with the model versus the model going off and spinning up agents and using those agents and doing specific tasks with a different model. Like talk through, you think about this stuff in the context of like founder mode and building companies and augmenting human staff with AI and agentic staff. Like what's your approach to doing that, Kevin?
Yeah, I think to me, and it's funny, I was just talking to like one of my teammates before this call and before this recording or whatever. And we were talking about like, how do you approach a workflow where there's no AI today? And then how do you like, what's the most intelligent way to apply AI to that? And like, how do you think about what you should, how do you separate the problem? And I think there's one piece of that that's like, how would you train a new employee to do that job? Right. And I think what tools would they need? What training would they need? What context would they need? What access would they need? And I think this idea that it's like, well, they need to log in to this system to get data. They need to log into this system to get the task queue. And they need to log into this system. So like, let's just take like a very simple one. Like, let's just say you're a finance person and you need to produce a weekly 12-week cash flow and 2 systems of record, right? You have, let's say QuickBooks and you have like Salesforce, right? Or HubSpot or whatever you use for sales. And so you're like, okay, well, the first thing you need to do is just have access to those 2 systems and dump the data and be like, hey, what do we think we're going to sell over the next 12 weeks? And what do we think of those sales will convert to cash on what time? And then what stuff do we already have sold that's going to collect cash on? And then what do we think the expenses are? Like pretty simple. But what you first figure out is like, well, the human that's doing that is constantly micro correcting both systems. It's like, oh, the sales pipeline's kind of wrong. And the QuickBooks thing has got these weird errors that we don't track correctly.
And the
And so
agent
for
doesn't know
me,
about those corrections.
yes. And so how do you know about those corrections? So for me, it's like, well, first, let's just fix the system of record. And so the first thing I did in those two things was wrote an automation that just scanned those two systems of record and been like, oh, if there's ever an anomaly, let's send that to the person in charge of it. And so one case the bookkeeper, and the other case is like the sales rep. It's like, hey, this deal's not in the right place, or it says it's a Q1 deal, but the close date's in Q2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fix it. And then it's like, okay, generate the report, and now have, sort of the sort of finance team look at it and be like, okay, what's good and bad? What will we change? What will we highlight? And so to me, like, it's that kind of layered step. And then you start running it, kind of in a shadow mode where it's like, it's not doing the job, but it's sending it. And then pretty soon you're like, damn, we're not making any corrections. It's kind of working. And then you can kind of like productize that flow. And so I think to me, it's, again, pretty much anything can be broken down into that way. I think the part where it's tricky is like, and I'd be curious on your side is like, because I've done some of this on like generating blog posts or generating articles or content. As you look at this stuff and you think about like, that's a very practical thing that your team does all the time. Like, how do you guys approach it? And like, how do you think about like the important pieces there?
I'll tell you, 2 years ago, we were making AI content on behalf of clients very differently, right? It was ChatGPT and Midjourney were the two tools we used, and we would generate articles, and then we would use human editors to review them. We would do the internal linking, follow all the SEO best practices. We would go to Midjourney and kind of create handcraft prompts to make images that looked appropriate for those articles. And that still was a lot of people hours. Fast forward to today, and I have an agent that's running 24/7 generating content for Winston Francois, for our clients, that can generate dozens of articles every day and publishes them every 30 minutes. And to your point, it's gotten so good that I don't touch it, and then it can just go. But in order to set that system up, it's not just one agent that's been given a prompt that goes off. There's the agent that comes up with the taxonomy and the schema that is relevant to all the different topics that we need to discuss that are important for keyword search and zero-click search on these AI kind of chatbots. There's the writer agent that goes and generates the content. There's the reviewer editor agent that reviews that content from the writer and says, hey, that wasn't very good. Let's go back and revise it. There's the creative agent that's going and making an image that pairs nicely with that content. And then there's the final like QA agent that makes sure, hey, does this article have an image? Is it within the word count that we need to hit? Touch the topic and match the taxonomy and the schema. And then that kind of final publisher agent pushes it live and then throws an error and says, hey, this one didn't go live for this reason. And so like now we've got a team of 6 or 7 virtual, AI agents that are doing that work. And I think, it's about designing to the earlier point you made in this conversation. It's like making sure that they have the right tools. So they all have access to the Google Nano Banana for image generation. They're using Claude for writing. They're using the WordPress API, the REST API to send back and forth the stuff and publish. And then, that's all coming back into Slack to talk about it, right? Like giving them the right tools and access and then setting up the team for success, which goes back to what you said a moment ago, which is, okay, so that's how we kind of build systems and build kind of virtual teams of AI agents. But when you're building a company of humans still, which we all are still doing, how do we set that up for success? Like I have a lot of thoughts from my early Google days watching Sheryl Sandberg do the hire A's versus don't hire the B's because they hire the C's and D's. But like you've basically been building startups for almost 3 decades now, Kevin. What is your kind of framework for building high performing teams?
You're looking for different talent to match with those different organizations as you scale across them. And to me, the fun part is this kind of 0 to 10 kind of thing where it's like, hey, you're just getting started. There's a lot of autonomy. You're not really even writing things down and tracking. Like there's this really high bandwidth discussion of like what needs to go be done. And the kind of people you want there are like highly trustworthy, but also like highly autonomous where they're like, hey, I can just go own this area and kind of figure it out and don't need a lot of like management, right? They don't need a lot of things. But I think the other thing, you need to be able to be brutally, truthfully honest. And I'm a pretty tough person, like with that, like honesty of like, this is not good work, or like, you need to go harder or faster or whatever. And I think, so I think that creates an environment that works for some people and definitely doesn't work for others. But for the right people, it's like invigorating. Like they're like, I just can't stop doing the thing because it's so exciting. And they have like so much autonomy that they really like it's really endless in terms of the impact that they can have and the creativity that they can apply to how they do their job, when they do it, where they do it, and that kind of thing. And so I think that part of the startup hiring is like
Yeah.
the best. But yeah.
The phrase I hear you say all the time is just like, grab a shovel, which I like a lot. And I think what that actually is the idea of hiring for high agency. So people, and I use the phrase external locus of control, which is like there's people that think the world happens to them, and that's the internal locus of control. Or sorry, high internal locus of control. External locus of control is like, oh, everything happens to me. I have no control of my world. Internal locus of control is like, I completely control my destiny. I'm in charge of where it goes, right? And I think what I've seen, because I've seen you manage teams and people, to sometimes to varying degrees of success, but I think it's because it's that filter that you're applying, which is like, does this person have the ability to go off and do work and come back and deliver without me having to spoon feed them instructions or things to do? And there's different bars for the administrative assistant person versus the like software engineer versus your co-founder, right? And I'm not saying that you're using the same framework to evaluate all those people, but there's a consistent thread through all of them, which is like, are you a high agency person with an internal locus of control that believes they can go do things and get them done on their own without somebody having to tell you what to do next?
Yeah, and then you raise your hand when you need help, right?
Yeah.
And you and then
I'm
and you're
blocked.
raising.
Help me out.
Yeah, and you're like, "Hey, I'm asking for help." I do think that, yeah, the shovel thing's an interesting one, because I think as you're starting companies, or even in bigger companies, it's very common to get a lot of advice from people,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Hey," able to tell you how they think it's
I
going
do
to be
this, do it
done,
this way.
and I'm like, "That's awesome, man." Like,
Why don't you go do that?
if you're so right, then just go do it. It's surprising how many people don't wanna pick up the shovel. Like, we always talk about, like, in interviews, are they willing to pick up the pen and go right on the board and, like, draw, like, what they're doing and scope it out? And I think the beautiful thing in startups is I'm like, you don't need to go to the board. Just go right to the work. And then, like, because look, I don't know the answer, and we're going to have to go figure this out. But a lot of it's like, are you just willing to get your hands dirty and like really get involved? And it's just really easy for people, especially ones that have had some success or have worked at larger companies. We're like, oh yeah, like I've kind of earned the right to play this role, or to deliver advice and to sort of show you the way. And I'm like, that's awesome. But like the best way to show me the way is show me the results. And like that surprisingly filters out a lot of people that frustrates the shit out of them, because they're just like, damn, like I just want to tell you how to do, like, hey, I
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. And
Yeah.
you're like, what do you mean do that anymore? Like, I don't get on cold calls, or
Yeah.
I don't sit on first sales calls, or like, oh,
That's
I
not
don't
my job is one of those phrases that's the kiss of death.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't fix bugs anymore.
Yeah.
Like I just work on these architecture stuff. Like I'm not a coder. Like you're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, like, I don't there shouldn't be I don't. You just be like, hey, what's the necessary
Yeah,
thing,
what
and
do
how
we
do you
need to
go do
do?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a self-selection thing, right? People are self-selecting out, as I've heard you say before, and I think in true founder mode spirit, the founders that roll up their sleeves and are working alongside their team and fixing bugs and getting on sales calls and talking to customers and doing whatever, like putting out whatever the big fire is, tend to be the ones that both earn the most respect from their team and also kind of encourage and end up cultivating an environment of people that all operate that way. They just want to go get stuff done and win. I think you say this a lot too, is like, I just want to win.
Yeah. Winning's really, really infectious.
Yeah.
It feels really good. And like, I mean, winning at all causes can be dangerous, but I think there is this sort of like figuring out what winning looks like, and then everybody kind of being on that same page, rowing in the same direction, all that kind of stuff. Like, you pick your favorite analogy, like, has been sort of a fun thing to go do. And it's like, how do we make sure that the first two set us up to be successful, to make it even faster to onboard the next 8, right? And then creating that at where that's exciting for people, and not like, oh wow, you have to do this other thing, we're gonna have to do this 8 times. It's like, no, let's like, again, hack the process to make this work where it's like kind of fun. And then because of that, now we can go do these other things that we couldn't do before, because the team went from 5 people to 12 people, or whatever the number ends up being.
And so I think that stuff all, when taken together, it's like, does this person fit that culture or not? And that's probably why you and JJ work so well together, is because like you guys come at it from a very different place.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like feelings aren't probably high on my like little chart when you do like we used to do these 360s at big companies and stuff, and like
Yeah.
emotion,
Yeah.
empathy, feelings,
Yeah.
like they're like it, like would get zeros on them or something. It would be like,
It's like,
and you're
are
like,
you okay, Kevin?
yeah, and you're like, are you okay? And you're like, well, no, but I just like the other things, like
Yeah.
competitive, winning, like I'll pick these other like sort of words that show up in the top 5 out of the your little skills matrix. And so I think, again, there's different kinds of cultures, and quite frankly, there's different people. Like, some people need more of that maybe calm energy or sort of like reflective sort of thinking of like, hey, how did we get to where we are and how do we think through that? The shift in terms of like, well, they're like, hey, we need a culture, like the team's down. We need a culture talk. And like, there's hey, we should go do an offsite or we should go do a like team building event. Or we go into a room and be like, let's go draw a chart of what winning looks like and redefine why we're here and how do we win. And I always motivated with that sort of approach versus the like, hey, let's go have a group family picnic. Although those are cool too. Like the good thing is the big companies do lots of that stuff. So there's plenty of time for group family picnics.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just really like my mindset's built around like the other side of it. I think for the startup itself, JJ and I find that balance sometimes just literally debating that in front of the team. Like I'll be
Yeah.
like, dude, we got to go reach this thing. This is what the customer
Yeah.
wants. This is how we're going to go achieve it. Da, da, da. And he's like, oh, we should, wait and see what this person thinks or that person thinks. And then I'll be like, no, I don't think so. We're just going to go do it. And if we, and it's fun because we've known each other long enough now that we can kind of complete each other's sentence and we know why the other person's saying it. And one of our teammates, he's always like, yeah, he's like the energy that and the anxiety that I bring. And so energy is probably the nice way of describing it. The anxiety is probably the more truthful way of like, I feel like we're moving too slow. I feel like we didn't achieve this thing. Many times like kind of can snap the team out of like, hey, we're just in the drudgery of this thing and we're not seeing like the golden apple that we're going to go collect once we reach that point. And so I think the shorter version of it is like, there's a balance, but to me, it's just way easier to describe it in very direct, kind of capitalistic, how do you win terms? And like, think of that as the mountain that we're conquering together as a team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's right. And so, when we zoom out and think about like good team member, bad team member, good AI, bad AI, I think it has a lot more to do with like what are the criteria that you're filtering for and what is the thing you're trying to achieve. And maybe, if you want a very cushy, feel good environment, then you'll select for that type of person that I don't think they'll be as hard driving as what you're describing as your preferred operator. And then the results may not match. I remember being at Google, 22 years old, right out of college, and just thinking like, what is this? This is insane. This is like an extension of college. Like all my meals are paid for every day. And I felt like people, and this is, 20 years ago, but like people were still working pretty hard. Like it wasn't like just like, oh, go get my free meals. Like you see a lot of the social media videos now, if somebody works at Meta or Google or Microsoft, and they're like, oh, I show up at 9:30 and I get my breakfast and then I like get my coffee and then I sit at my desk for an hour and then I go get my lunch. And like, I don't, I didn't feel back then I felt like, oh man, this is so great. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be in this office for 12 hours. But I think that's me and not the place probably.
Yeah. No, I think it is. And it self-selects
Yeah.
the right people into the right place. I think the good, bad AI, good human versus or bad employee kind of thing, I think about it as like, is the time I'm spending with this team member giving me leverage or output where I'm like feeling that that's a good, like a positive relationship? Like the more time I spend with this team member or employee, am I getting more output for that? Or is that an extension of my thinking? And then I think AI is similar, right? Is the time that I'm spending talking or chatting with this agent
Yeah. You
feeling like
sometimes
the
refer to
output
it
that
as
I'm
the
getting
hourly
is like,
rate.
yeah, is it?
Well, it's like, what else could you spending your time on? What's the opportunity cost of investing in this person? I just remember when Loom first came out and like what a game changer that was, right? It's so amazing. And like what I want to do now, and I think Grok is the first model that does this. I don't know if the other ones are doing it yet, where it'll watch the videos. Like I want to start making Looms for my AI agents in the same way I do them for people on my team, and to see if that can deliver the same kind of results. Cause like that's a super leveraged thing to do. It's like, okay, I'll spend 5 minutes, I'll make this Loom, I'll send it off to the agent or the team member, and then they're going to go do that thing 1,000 times because it's a repetitive, we do it every day or whatever.
Yeah. And I think the magic is like, again, and are they like, as you spend more time with the agent or the human, is that compounding? Like, are the conversations getting more impactful with less amount of words? We're like, oh, we already get like what the mission is together and what we're going to go do. And so the things that you're asking of me and the things that I'm asking of you is creating this loop where you're like, yeah, we can spend, the same 30 minutes together once a week. And it feels like we're getting a lot more done between each other. And you're also finding a way to leverage like the time together. And then similar with AI, where it's like, man, I want to just keep talking to this agent because it feels like it's letting me do things and helping me get things done where the 20 minutes or the 30 minutes that I invested talking or chatting with this thing produced something that I wouldn't have been able to like spend 30 minutes like on my own or with even another person. Because a lot of at least the things that I've been using the agent stuff for is like reaching into like large data sets of like whether it's CRMs or tools or like the internet, and then merging that with some like kind of local data and then synthesizing over that and then producing it. But I think the one thing that the risk is that it's so easy to do that and then have it produce a 30-page doc.
Yeah.
And then now do I tax other people by sending them a 30-page doc, or do I distill that back down and send them a one-pager of all of the things that I learned that, now we have impact with each other? Because I do think that is
It's the right question. And
risk.
there's been many a day where your sleep score suffers because you stayed up late working with the agents.
And more than I would have imagined, then again, before I measured my sleep score years ago, like clearly stayed up late, addicted to like, working on Google ads or trying to crack this coding thing or something. And now it's insane the number of things that sort of, quite frankly, just deeply capture my attention.
Kevin, that was a fun one. We covered a lot of ground: AI, email tools, LLM, memory problems, agentic workflows, and then we flipped it into how you actually build teams that operate the same way.
Yeah. And I think the through line is the same, whether you're talking about AI or a new hire. It's like, how do you compound the time you spend with them, or are they taxing the time you spend with them?
Yeah, that's the filter. And honestly, the memory audit you described, telling, Chat or Claude to separate what you actually told it from what it thinks it knows, that's a move every founder using these tools should actually try.
Yeah, 70% wrong, man. It was a scary number. And if you're building on top of that, it's shaky. And to me, it was pretty cool to have this doc. And now that I've edited the doc, it's like Kevin's ground truths. I think the next move is to sort of turn that into like something more project specific versus like all the random things I've talked to Chat and Claude about over the last 30 days.
All right, Kevin, what are the founder mode top 5 takeaways?
Yeah, I think you want to manage your AI's memory kind of like you'd manage employee onboarding. Design your agent teams rather than single agents, right? You want to really give special instructions, provide those guardrails, and then hire for high agency, this internal locus of control. And how do you really understand, like, can these people go execute and get things done? And then the time you're spending, whether it's with, the best employees or your best sort of AI tools, should compound, right? You shouldn't be doing a one-to-one thing. You should see that sort of improve over time. And then finally, my favorite, winning is culture, right? Like there is a culture of sort of like achieving together. And I think it's super infectious and really fun.
If you're a founder figuring out how to build with AI and humans side by side, or you know someone who is, send them this episode.
And if you haven't already, subscribe to Founder Mode. Leave us a review so more founders and operators can find the show. That's it for today, because the best teammates, human or AI, don't wait to be told what to do next.